Now before we begin, all information has been provided by Retro Gaming Magazine. I am in no way affiliated with the magazine, I'm just an avid reader who really enjoyed the articles. I may not necessarily agree with all of their picks, but this is done as a satire and also for fun. Enjoy. Welcome to Retro Gamer Magazine's Gaming's Biggest Disasters first annual award show, hosted by the Loch SNES Monster. This year's awards include Worst Console, Worst Handheld, and more. Earlier on this evening, we got to see some of the stars of the gaming world walk the red carpet. Here we take a look at Atari 2600 Jr. in an elegant all-black tuxedo. Next down the red carpet is the Super Nintendo. So glad Super Nintendo hasn't been rocking that terrible yellow tan that sometimes he is known for. Oh, here she is, quite a beauty, the NES. She's been on a little bit of a tear lately. A lot of people saying there's a lot of cartridges going in that girl's slot. And last we have a slim PS1. Oh, I think there was a wardrobe malfunction. Oh, cut the feed, cut the feed. Now, to start the show and to present the awards, your host of the first annual Biggest Disasters, Loch SNES Monster. Thank you, really guys, too much. So I'm hosting this year's Retro Gaming's Biggest Disasters. I'm Loch SNES Monster, and let's look at the first category. Worst peripheral. A peripheral device is defined as a console device that is not essential to that console. These auxiliary devices are intended to be connected to said console. Nintendo Power Glove, Mattel, 1989. The Power Glove utilized cheap technology and a clever engineering trick to accomplish feats that at the time could only otherwise be accomplished with robotic tech, costing upwards of $10,000. Despite the interest in the Power Glove and the technology that it did utilize, the peripheral was not a success. Getting it to function with existing NES games was a cumbersome affair that involved tapping in a seemingly endless number of inputs on the controller pad, and the device required users to rig up a complicated sensor array in order to pick up movement. E-Reader, Nintendo, 2001. A card scanner for the Game Boy Advance. It allowed the machine to read data in the form of dot patterns. While it was popular in Japan, it never took off anywhere else. With the simple dot holding only 2.2 kilobytes of data, that meant that you'd need multiple cards for even the simplest games. This device was discontinued after only a few short years and never even made it to Europe. Super Scope, Nintendo, 1992. This battery gobbler probably wasn't the biggest financial disaster for Nintendo, and it did push Sega into sinking money into the Menacer as a response. But for players, the Super Scope was an unwieldy beast, and even those that did find enjoyment with it were left with little to play, with only 8 dedicated games released for it. And your winner of the worst peripheral goes to Nintendo's Power Glove. It's so bad. Worst video game. E.T. the Extraterrestrial, Atari Incorporated, 1982. Although not as terrible as many would have you believe, this game was pushed out in only 6 weeks to meet the Christmas demand, and as a tie-in movie of the same name. E.T. suffered from poor graphics, tough controls, and a sense of not knowing where to go. Daikatana, Kemco, 2000. This game suffered from its own hype created by former id Software guru John Romero. Add in fiddly controls, sloppy presentation, and a large amount of fogging, and it's little wonder why the Nintendo 64 version was so poorly received. Daikatana's uninteresting level design, weak AI, and ugly visuals are clear indicators of the game's overall quality, including plenty of uninteresting and poorly executed ideas. Sonic the Hedgehog, Sega Team, 2006. Some mild bestiality and arguably the worst 3D outing for the popular mascot to date, Sonic the Hedgehog is a dire mess of a game and arguably the low point of the series thus far. Glitchy visuals, horrible control, a terribly erratic camera, numerous bugs, and a terrible new character in the form of Silver will ensure it remains a hated game for years to come. And now, the winner for the worst video game goes to... Daikatana! Worst console, handheld, etc. Game.com, Tiger Electronics, 1997. Despite its high-profile licenses such as Sonic the Hedgehog and Resident Evil, the act of actually playing a Game.com is misogynistic as the dreadful screen turns everything into a blurry mess. It admittedly had some nice ideas, including being able to go online and using a touchscreen, but it was still complete garbage. N-Gage, Nokia, 2003. This Finnish mobile phone manufacturer did correctly predict that mobile phones would become a popular gaming platform. However, its own gaming phone was hammered by a high price and a lack of quality exclusive games, as well as questionable design choices that included the infamous decision to locate the speaker and the microphone on the side of the device. Virtual Boy, Nintendo, 1995. The internal technology of the Virtual Boy was relatively clever, generating a convincing 3D image with a single LED row and an oscillating mirror for each eye. The verdict on the Virtual Boy, though, was an unmitigated disaster for both Nintendo and players. Nintendo only sold 770,000 units after 5 years, falling well short of its stated target goal of 3 million. The device was physically awkward and caused many players to report eye pain. And in the category of Worst Console Handheld, the winner is... the Virtual Boy! Worst Console. CDI, Philips, 1991. Launching with a large asking price of $700 and starting with a poor early game lineup, this hobbled the CDI from the very beginning, but Philips continued until 1998 regardless, eventually losing close to $1 billion on the project. $1 billion. 32X, Sega, 1994. The 32X was an interesting idea, but it was doomed to fail. Consumers were already wary of Sega's upgrading following the disappointment of the Mega CD. They quickly passed it, identifying it as a stopgap before the PlayStation and the Saturn's release. After an initial flurry of good games, quality software dried up quickly as developers shunned the machine in favor of the more powerful and dedicated next-generation consoles. Atari Jaguar, 1993. While it was aggressively promoted as the first ever 64-bit console, proudly comparing its specifications to those of competing consoles from Sega, Nintendo, and the 3DO, Jaguar's programmers had a hard time using the powerful hardware, instead porting existing 16-bit titles. While hardware bugs and supply problems played some part in the Jaguar's downfall, its biggest problem was with the perception that it didn't have any good games. And now the big one, the winner of Worst Console. This was a close one, and your winner is the Sega Genesis or Mega Drive 32X! thank you all for coming out to this prestigious award ceremony, the first annual Biggest Disasters in Gaming. We look forward to seeing each and every one of you back here next year. Drive safe, game hard, and tip your waiters and waitresses. Good night, everyone.